All right, it's good to be with you. My name is Cisco Walker, and I'm an evangelist here in the International District. And tonight we've got something that's a little bit different for you. We've got something that is a little bit kind of off of the religious grid, if you will. But you'll also find that there's a lot of theological stuff tonight that we're going to attempt to talk about. And let me read a text for you just very quickly. Acts chapter 19 and verse 18 says this: "And many who had believed came confessing and telling their deeds. Also many of those who had practiced magic brought their books together and burned them in the sight of all. And they counted up the value of them, and it totaled 50,000 pieces of silver. So the word of the Lord grew mightily and prevailed." Tonight I have with me my good friend Kent here. We've done a video before, and I'm starting a series called Sympathy for the Devil. But tonight we're going to really look into the abyss, if you will, and we're going to be talking about black metal. Now, Kent, you've played in the black metal scene for several years. So can you tell us exactly what your definition of black metal is?
Wow. I started in the black metal scene. Actually started taking interest in around 1995.
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, it was new and fresh to me. And at that point, I think black metal basically came to America for the first time. Not for the first time, but people really started getting involved with it because of the murders and the church burnings that happened a couple years prior. To me, it's a good scene. I think it's very interesting. I think I met some really good people in the scene. I really think it's, if you're kind of a narrow-minded person, you can kind of look at it and be like, well, they're all kind of down and drab people that are not intelligent, but, it's there's a lot of intelligent people. To actually write and do this kind of music, it takes a lot of intelligence. Some people view it as a lot of screaming, a lot of tremolo, fast picking stuff that makes no sense. But so I started in about 95, and I went with it until about 2006. So it was a while,
Now, Ken, is it strange for you? Is it refreshing to you or strange to you that a Christian believing evangelical would take interest in black metal? I mean, is that kind of odd?
It is, and I'm kind of glad you did it. You said you've seen the movie and you've been listening to podcasts. I'm glad you have, and I'm glad that you kind of took interest in it. So I thank you for that, and I thank you for your time talking to me about it, because I sure know a lot of it. My dates and bands might not be up to par because it's been some time. I've kind of taken a break from the scene, but I do know a lot about black metal, and so fire away.
And I'm so glad that you brought that up. A lot of people they just look at it on a very superficial level. But as I've looked at it, and this is one of the things that I'm trying to do with this series on Sympathy for the Devil, because it's as an evangelical Christian, there are elements of evil and there are things that are satanic, but trying to pinpoint them and trying to define them and trying to corral them and put fences around them is very, very difficult to do. And it's so interesting to me that you said that you've met some very interesting people. You met some people that were very intelligent people. You met some people that you probably still have relationships with today. And even though the fundamentalist, the evangelical fundamentalist, will just automatically dismiss all of it, throw it out. I think a lot of evangelicals, like, they're afraid to look into the abyss, right? They're afraid to really see what this is about. They don't see the people that are involved. They don't see the tragedy that's involved, the suffering that's involved with people who play it, who are trying to express themselves. They just automatically demonize it, villainize it, wrap it up in a nice little bow, put a box on it, and we're done with it. And like, you just can't do that. A lot of evangelicals, they would just like it all to go away. Yeah. They just want it to go away, and like, it's a piece of history, right? It's a piece of like what happened in Norway and what happened here with black metal in North America. Like, it's a cult phenomenon. You know, it's something that we need to look at and talk about it, because there can be good things that come from it, but there's also been a lot of strange things that have come out of it. You remember the lawsuits that were filed against some of the tamer bands, right? Judas Priest, Ozzy Osbourne, some of the things like this. And so black metal has always been associated with crime, right? Acts of violence, arson, murder. So like, you have all of that constantly going on. And can you tell us a little bit about what the lyrics of the songs are generally about?
I'm glad you asked that. Well, I think when North America actually got their hands on black metal, and from what I understand, the start of black metal, from what I understand, I think basically came from the 80s band Venom, Welcome to Hell.
Mm-hmm. And they were British, correct?
Yeah. I believe they were British. Never really got into them. They were slightly before my time. I think it was like 1985 or so that they came out, 86. Welcome to Hell came out. And then there's a band called Bathory that came out soon after that. Mm-hmm. I call this the first wave of, black metal. So I never really got into those bands. I was very young. I'm 45, so at that point, I was like seven years old. From what people what really got lost in translation with this black metal stuff is when this stuff came out, they automatically thought that all these bands were satanic. And I found out way later on, that a lot of this stuff that I was listening to had to do with a lot of pagan side of stuff. Really not a whole lot of Satanism going on, but when you hear somebody screaming like that and hearing something so cold and raspy, it was not in English for one. So as a person who doesn't know how to read any other language or whatever, it comes off really cold and satanic, and the appearance of them with the spikes and the corpse paint and everything really brings off some evil Satanism vibes. But in fact, a lot of those bands, it was a lot of, yes, they were anti-Christian, but they weren't satanic. And it's a whole two different things, because in Norway, what ended up happening is, Christianity took over, and what they ended up doing was basically tearing down a lot of their churches up there. And setting up Christian churches where they burnt their churches down, which pissed a lot of people off, probably still does. So a lot of those lyrics were, anti-Christian lyrics. But as far as satanic point of view, there was bands here and there that did it, like, Marduk, Gorgoroth, Cythereal, bands like that.
Because like Marduk is, if I may be incorrect, but Marduk was a Canaanite god. He was like a demigod in like Old Testament, right? Marduk. Mm-hmm. I think he was even like a Canaanite god. So like if you understand the Norwegian black metal scene, like it very quickly became like it became kind of like political, almost like a nationalistic type of thinking. Like it was almost like a protest. And what is it, Count Grishnak Varg would say that the reason that we burned these churches down is because this used to be a traditional pagan worship site for our Norwegian culture, and the Christians came in and they desecrated our land. This was part of our ritual, this was part of our ideology. They came in, they desecrated it. They had no respect for Norwegian culture, no respect for Norwegian life, and they erected their church, they erected their temple upon it. And so that was, from what I could understand, at least looking at him at an elementary level, then he decided to take action and make a political statement. I kind of see Varg, the singer for Burzum, I saw him kind of as like a radical, like a fanatic. He was a musician, almost like a Norwegian nationalist,
That's probably the word nationalist you're using is probably you're probably right on point with that.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask you is do you think that Varg really, being as young as he was when he committed the crimes, because if you watch the documentary Until the Light Takes Us, you see Varg, but he's it's 20 years in prison, so he's had a long time to meditate and to think about,
read books.
Read books and become educated. But do you think he really knew the statements that he was making at that young of an age, or do you think that it was through the years in the penal system that he kind of had the hindsight is 20/20 moment?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think these guys from the start knew exactly what they were doing. If I remember correctly, 91, 92, from what I understand, Norway was getting westernized a lot. McDonald's was starting to hit up there.
Yeah, and they hated it.
And a lot of Americanization started happening up there.
Well, some of them hated it, right? Some of them hated it. The guy that had the record shop, that was one of the complaints.
Right.
That was one of the complaints with Varg, because Varg was like, all these guys want to do is sit around and eat cheeseburgers and drink Coca-Colas from America, and they don't see that our culture is being devastated and destroyed, and they're fakes and they're phonies, right? And that added that fuel to the fire.
And also, at that point, 91, 92, 93, these were the pinnacle years of death metal. And at that point, you had, death metal was ruled everywhere. I mean, it was almost commercially, I'm not going to say that, but it was almost, everybody was into it. It was a very popular scene. And with that, I think it was basically just a calling card to say, hey, we're going to start this kind of music, be more extreme than death metal. Because at that point, you had bands like Morbid Angel, Deicide, who actually did talk about Satanism, but it wasn't that style of music. So with what you just said, I think on top of the other side, they were developing a type of sound, a kind of music that it was a little more extreme than death metal. And being an American listening to this and hearing somebody yell in Norwegian language, you don't know what the hell they're saying.
Yeah.
So it kind of came across as real evil, and it still does. You know, a lot of that early stuff, bands like Burzum, Dark Throne Mayhem, very, very thin production.
It was lo-fi. Explain the concept between lo-fi, like the way that it was recorded.
Right, it was basically just primitively recorded, and I really think it was just a bunch of kids that didn't have a whole lot of money, which was partially true. But, you had a Burzum album that was recorded with maybe 2 or 3 mics, maybe one by the drummer, and, just however they did it was really primordial. I'm not sure how they do it, but in the end, it just was a really tinny, thin, very low production sound, which kind of gave it a cold, grim tone.
Ambiance, right?
Yes, and with death metal at that point, it was heavily produced, well thought of music.
Yeah, and see, that's one thing I really like. I really thought that was something that was exceptional, because a lot of people, they don't realize, because They're not going to look at it. They're not going to take it seriously. And you can take it too seriously. You can look too long at it. You can do that with anything. There is moderation to a certain degree. But like one thing, I liked the lo-fi, how they were like, we're tired of this super polished, super perfect studio sound. It almost, we discussed this. It kind of almost had like a punk rock ethos. Like
That's exactly.
we're gonna take this music. We're gonna make it our way. We're gonna produce it. We're not gonna let anybody else control it.
Yes.
And like I think that is something that was quite interesting. And you said that the way that the guitars were played and the way, like, not everybody can play black metal, right?
Yeah, no. You're
Yeah. Like,
it took me years to develop it, and I'm actually really, not to toot my own horn, but I've been doing it for a while. I know how it sounds. Yeah, it takes years. Either you can do it or you can't.
and there's something with the strumming of it, right?
Tremolo picking.
Yeah. And like that came like out of thin air, right? Like that had never been done before.
Not like that. Not how those Norwegian cats were doing in the early days. With technical death metal, there's like a lot of single notes and a lot of structure going on. With these guys, they more basically normalized their chords and just tremolo picked the hell out of it, and which kind of after a while turns into a blur. And when you have it on a lo-fi recording, as you call it, it kind of comes out like a chainsaw grinding sound almost. I call it chainsaw sound.
Yeah.
That's how the guitars were. And what really got me on this early black metal stuff is just how gritty the screaming was.
Yeah.
It almost sounded like an evil witch screaming at you. I mean, I still can't define how they were doing it back in the day. But as we're talking about polished music, after the first wave of this black metal, let's just say after the church burnings and after the murder of Euronymous and all that stuff,
and all of that, for people that may not know what all that is, that was the Norwegian death metal scene, because like that's what, not death metal, but that was the Norwegian black metal scene.
Yeah.
So after the crimes, did it become more about production?
Yeah, thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, it did. This is when I started to get interested, because Burzum, Mayhem, Dark Throne, again, to me, it was like 1992, 93, 12, 13 years old at that time. My first album that I ever bought, and if anybody who knows reading this, it was a band called Emperor. They did a split album with Enslaved called Hordani's Land. Fell in love with it just because it was so gritty, and it's a great album nonetheless. But after that album happened, we're talking 93, 94, I got into what they called the second wave of black metal.
Okay.
And once black metal started to get more popular, you started, German bands started popping up, American bands, pretty much a lot of black metal bands around the world started popping up around, I'd say 95.
Mm-hmm.
And this is when they got really good, clear production. A little more thought went into the music instead of just writing, a 25-minute album in 3 days.
And what was interesting with Burzum is like it was like one guy.
It was one guy.
Yeah.
And so as black metal progressed, it grew. It more grew. And second wave hit, and we had bands like Emperor, Cythereal, Dimmu Borgir, Old Man's Child, Satyricon, Olver, Gorgoroth, Impaled Nazarene, and a band called Dissection, which is my inspiration as far as playing this kind of music, because what Dissection did was basically take classical music and just added distortion to it. I mean, there was nothing satanic, I don't think, ever with Dissection, but their music was just, instead of just a tremolo picking and screaming and screaming, it was actual legit like classical music, and it was very well thought of and written. And they only did a couple of albums because the singer, he killed himself. I was lucky to see them in 1995 in Chicago with Morbid Angel, and I did realize at the time that they only did one tour in America.
But as I've looked at some of these things, and as I've talked with you on like even on a local, even on a local level, there's some characteristics, and they're very unfortunate and very tragic that seem to surround some of these musicians that are involved in playing black metal. I know it's anti-establishment. It's very nonconformist. In some cases, it's anti-God. It's Luciferian. It's murderous, hateful. But I noticed that there seems to be the musicians and like you said, the singers. They struggle with depression. They struggle with suicide. They struggle with substance abuse. They can even become genocidal to a certain degree. The problem with self-mutilation. So now, as a hardline Christian would say, well, that is because this music is demonic, and you may not be able to call it satanic, but those, depression and genocidal and hateful and murderous and arson and all of these other things, like your typical old-fashioned fundamentalist is going to say, well, that is a no-brainer, that it's satanic, that the devil or the powers of darkness are at work in that. But I know that it isn't necessarily that easy. But why is it that so many of the people and it's important for the church to remember that these are people playing this kind of music. Yeah. These are people that are made in the similitude of God. These people have problems. It's an outlet for them, and it may not be an outlet that we like or that we desire or that we agree with, but we always have to bring it back to, like, these are real people. This isn't just little chess pieces, but like, why do so many suffer from depression and sorrow? And there seems to be a trend in it. There's something about it that seems to be very self-destructive on the musicians that play it.
That's very, I agree with that. A lot of people that I know in the black metal scene, death metal in general, whatever, extreme music, a lot of folks that I know probably had it rough growing up. Struggles with depression. My good friend Joe, we did a band Heosphoros for a while, and he's not with us no more. And
how did he pass?
He just drinking succumbed him.
Yeah, it wasn't a bullet or a noose.
No,
it was alcoholism.
It was continual drinking. And,
Now, did he ever confess? I know this may be difficult, but it's just. Did he ever confess that he felt tormented or vexed, that he heard voices? Did he suffer from severe, like, psychological problems, in your opinion? I know we're not clinicians. I know we're not like qualified to make those, but those opinions. But did he ever? Did he seem like did he have problems with mental health? The years that you knew him.
Joe was just Joe kept to himself a lot. I didn't know a whole lot of his personal life.
Uh-huh.
He kept music and his life separated, so I never really got to know him a whole lot.
Yeah.
The only side I knew of him is he was a very pleasant, very smart individual. We worked like this. To me, he didn't seem really depressed or having any kind of struggles, but he did drink a lot, and it got to the point to where he just went off the rails. And I don't want to bring it up, but I think I might have contributed a little bit to it, because with me and Joe, we were very passionate, so much about black metal for 9, probably 10 years at this point. He went on to do different other bands that didn't do the corpse paint, didn't do the black metal stuff.
Yeah.
It was kind of more tame-ish kind of death metal stuff. I was in a band for 10 years, Pulsating, and the word Satan in it, we weren't even, black metal. We were more like political. Our words were very much like what my singer was going through in life. It was very personal stuff.
Sure.
But as the years went on, we always had this conceit of, geez, it's really time to do a damn black metal album. And with time constraints and doing different projects and bands, we never fully got to do it, and I think that kind of led to his depression a little bit, because we made an album and it got I don't know what label it was, but in Norway or Germany, one of the places, they want us to sign on. They said, hey, you know, can you give us some more, and if you can, we want to sign you. We never did it because I was really sticking on this death metal band that was in, and I didn't want to do it, and he did other bands, and he just started to drink more. And the last show I did with Pulsating was in 2011. Our singer, he lost his voice from yelling for so many years, so I had Joe come in to do vocals. Yeah. And I have the video of it, and with this kind of music, you can kind of get around just yelling and screaming, you know, because it's, you know, with audible ears, you can't really understand it. But Joe, he just got smashed, went up on stage and did a G.G. Allin because the guy didn't know. He didn't know the music. He didn't have anything written out. So the guy just went on stage and was a complete spaz for 45 minutes. Yeah. The crowd ate it up.
Did he self-mutilate?
No, not this time. Yeah. But he ended up, his thing was barfing and throwing up on stage.
Yeah, yeah. You know, well, if we have time, like we might get to Gigi, because Gigi was like Gigi was North America, right? Mm-hmm. Gigi was from New Hampshire, you know, so you know, he's shock rock, and you know, he's about as vile as you can get. But so I understand, like I can see to a certain degree what Count Grishnak Varg did with the churches, making his statement, you know, about how Christianity had come in and just kind of metaphorically just kind of knocked Norwegian culture and Norwegian beliefs and Norwegian ideologies out of the way, had no respect for that. But like, why do America? Okay, like that was Varg's axe to grind. Okay, as a zealot, as a nationalist, possibly, as a Maccabean type. But like, why? As it concerns American black metal bands, like why do American black metal bands, like, why do they hate Christianity?
I think it's probably the same fact the Norwegians don't like it.
Okay.
Everybody's got their axe to grind with religion. And I do too. I just think it's a false front. I really think it's, you know, believe in what you believe, but to me, I ultimately think that religion is the very first form of you know, scaring the shit out of people to get them to believe into something. You know, it's fine if you want to believe in an imaginary man in the sky. If that makes you sleep at night, fine. But you don't preach it to people and say, well, if you don't believe in this, then, you know, you're you know, I just have a hard time with like Christianity and Catholicism and just religion and
in some ways, like you can make, you know, there's actually parallels with what Varg did, and I'm not advocating violence, I'm not advocating murder, I'm not advocating arson, but like you can look at the Catholic Church and the spread of religion and how, you know, like for instance, like going onto the reservations and you know, proselytizing and you know, and trying to eradicate and change the culture, you know, with indigenous people, with North American people, with different types of Native American people. Like, no wonder they hate Christianity, because like you know, they feel like everything that they believed in was just bulldozed out of the way. And so, you know, that is one area that the church has unfortunately failed miserably in. But do you feel that just because that happens, you know, did you know people that took it beyond just the music, that struck out back at society? Because I know that Varg was also Count Grishnak from Burzum. I know that he was also very against like the McDonald's coming, like Coca-Colas, like anything American. Like he didn't want anything to do with that, and so he despised that. And you know, Varg actually had a Mephistophelian attitude about things, and because he says, if you want to build something new, you have to destroy the old first. And that comes directly from Faust, So the story of Faust, the German story of Faust, and Mephistopheles was the one that appeared to the alchemist, and he said, I'll give you whatever you want. But you're going to have to give me your soul. And Mephistopheles believed that in order, and if you want to build something new, then you have to completely get rid of everything. Almost like Thanos, right? Remember Thanos, when he snaps his fingers, he gets all the gemstones, and he's going to pay the sacrifice. He's going to do whatever it takes. And when he snaps his fingers, everything's gone. And when everything's gone, then he can build and create his new world or his new kingdom. And those are interesting ideas, but I think that you have to be very careful with those ideas. Do you does that music kind of generate that kind of feeling for people that play it and for people that listen to it?
I think it's just a really terrific outlet, because a lot of these people, musicians like myself, thank God I didn't get raised like this, but a lot of these people that did got religion forced down their throats. And,
okay.
I can't really think of anybody who took it beyond the music, but there was a whole lot of self-mutilation. There was a whole lot of depression going on. For 15 years, I was a freaking mess. For many years, I had the long hair. I wore the corpse paint. I did the gauntlets, the spikes. Now it's just normal dress for me every day. And then, for some weird reason, well, not weird, but nobody wanted to work with me anymore because I was that much of a miserable prick. That, they see me playing guitar and they're like, man, he's a great guitar player, but do you really want this guy in the band? So that went on. So a lot of people weren't working with me because I was just that down and out. And this music changed me, man. I was in a dark place for a very, very long time.
All right. Okay. Well, and I've heard similar things for that. And I've got a question here. It says, I've heard people throughout the years say things like this, punk rock saved my life, death metal saved my life. Even as you said, black metal saved my life. I knew a girl that said that she was going through this morbid, awful time of depression, and she loved Linkin Park, and she said that Linkin Park ministered to her to such a degree that it helped her overcome suicide. It helped her to realize, to generalize her pain and to generalize her dysfunction, because once you can generalize something, then you don't feel like a leper that's just out on the outskirts. So people have said that. They've said that about Lincoln. A lot of people, they've said that about some of the people in the Seattle grunge, music scene. So how did black metal help you through those difficult times?
Well, it pretty much made me go to a place where I didn't have to deal with my problems.
Okay.
At that point, when I got into black metal, let's say 1995, I was 16 at the time, I was already playing guitar for about 5 years. And I picked it up really quick, and I picked up this particular style real quick. So I was left alone a lot as a kid. And, I got ignored a lot. And I really start to think this might be just a damn generational thing. Because a lot of kids nowadays, they listen to black metal, and it's even more popular now than it's ever been. It's more of a commodity nowadays than anything else. But back then, if you were listening to black metal or death metal, obviously you were something wrong with you, or you got raised wrong. Because a lot of my friends in my, at my age group, we're Gen X. We got left alone. The key was under the mat. You microwave your food, and you were left alone all day to your devices.
Latchkey kid.
That's exactly what our generation was. And at that point, if you're not getting raised by your parents, you basically raise yourself. And I think a lot of people that I know that play death metal, black metal, whatever, I think it's just
to be honest, and to be honest and to be fair, when you're a teenager, and you're rebelling, there's and people don't like to admit this, but it's fun. There's power in that because you belong. You know, you're looking for a community to belong to. And I realize that black metal, punk rock, all that kind of stuff, you know, it is a double-edged sword, but there's got to be something to it because I've experienced it, you've experienced it, and you know, almost like in a cheesy way, like the Brando thing. You know, like, what are you rebelling against, Johnny? You know, he's like, well, what do you got? You know, like there's something to that. That's why people have always been drawn to rock and roll. They've always been drawn to the dark side, the darker things of life. People, they seem to be more interested in satanic things than they are religious things, or that they are Christian things, because for some reason we have this morbid curiosity, like where we'd rather peer into that abyss instead of look up towards God or the sublime or sovereignty or divinity. Like most people are like, I don't want to mess with all that. I just want to stay right here, and because there's something dark about this, there's something appealing about this, but you got to be careful with it too, because you know, a lot of people, they never come out of it, they never recover from it.
It'll take you. It's a terrific platform for people who need to express something. You know, death metal, anger, black metal, you know, a lot of religious questions, a lot of, you know, a whole lot of stuff.
Now, you said something to me one time, sorry to interrupt you, but you said something to me one time that you were playing with a certain group, and just to let everybody know, like Kent took it seriously. Like, he wore the corpse paint, he wasn't a poser, he did it for 15 years. You know, they played shows, they toured. You were even going to tour in Europe, you know, so like...
I almost did.
It wasn't just a bunch of guys sitting around in a garage with a pentagram, you know, drinking bong water. I mean, like, these guys were, like, really into this, and they took it to a level that most people just sit around and talk trash about. They never get that far. But, like, you actually got pretty far with it.
Yeah,
you know?
I did for a while, you know. I was in Colorado, and strangely as it sounds, the Colorado metal scene was wonderful. What can I say? It was a great scene from, well, I was in it from 1999 to 2015-ish, roughly. Played in a lot of different bands. I knew a lot of bands. And almost every band that played extreme type of music, whether it was black or death metal, grindcore, you know, what have not, we were all very passionate about it. And I don't know, maybe if it was just a time period or the correct place, but we were all really good. There was a lot of bands that were just good. My band, I didn't play for them for a couple of days. It didn't work out, but Skinned, they toured the world and everywhere else. Cephalic Carnage. I mean, I can go off and on all these bands that, you know, if somebody's watching this, they'll be like, oh, yeah, okay, that's cool.
Yeah.
But we were all very good, and I don't know if maybe it just grew out of the time, but it just seemed like from late 90s to almost early 2010, you've been around a while, you get better as a musician, you get better as a vocalist, and the bands were really peaking like 15 years ago. Nowadays, to me, with the digital recordings, the crisp, just everything is so sterile right now, to where when at my peak of my day, it was amps, you know, it didn't sound that great. There was kind of like this gritty sound to metal at that point, to where I would say probably 2013 till now, everything's digital, everything is sterile. So metal in general, to me right now, has this very clean, safe kind of digitized sound. Whereas 15 years ago, all the way to G.G. Allen, there was always, you know, Black Flag.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You know,
because you had
Fugazi,
and Minor Threat, because you had analog.
Right. And thank you.
You could hear the anger, you could hear the distortion, you could hear the feedback, and
getting goosebumps just hearing, just feeling, you know.
And everything now, you're right. It's almost like this Huxleyan, like, Brave New World sensitized sound, and it just sucks. And I don't want all the energy, all the emotion is just bled out of it.
Thank you. And I don't want to talk too bad about it, because I got a lot of friends that do a lot of bands right now. But what's happening is a lot of these people, even with the artwork, they're just doing AI stuff, going into the studio, laying down tracks like this, and just basically having it all just sugar-coated.
Yeah.
I don't know, I can't really explain it, but, you know, death metal, black metal in the 90s had a grittiness to it that sounded better. Where now today it's all crystal clean production, and I'm not really liking what I'm hearing.
Yeah, you talked about you talked about the music becoming like a commodity, somewhat mainstream, right? And like I thought about this. Like you go into Walmart now, like you'll see an AC/DC shirt, you'll see a Guns N' Roses shirt, you'll even see a Metallica shirt, you'll see like a Nirvana shirt, right? The little smiley face, the little with the you'll see but one thing you don't see Deicide, you don't see Obituary, you don't see Death, you don't see Slayer, you're certainly not going to see Mayhem, and like I called Hot Topic because like I researched this stuff. I called Hot Topic and I said, hey, do you have any black metal shirts in stock? Right? And the guy was like, he perked up and he was like, what? He's all no. I was like, do you have Mayhem? Do you have Dark Throne? Do you have Satyricon? Do you have and he couldn't believe that I even and he was like, no, I wish we had that kind of stuff in here. He's like, but he said we had some Mayhem, but we don't carry it anymore. And like that was one of the things that happened that I saw with Until the Light Takes Us was the guy from Dark Throne.
Fenris.
Yeah, Fenris, the one that was on the train, and they searched him for explosives, and but he said that how black metal had become like a brand.
Yes.
And like that it was just like kind of gone. And a lot of people, from what I could gather and the research that I did, like they despise that. They hate that because like it's lost the edge, it's lost the rawness, it's lost the intensity of it.
I have to really go with Fenris on this one because there was a whole lot of energy with this first wave of black metal because I don't know, man, maybe it's just the right people and the right bands, but there's a whole lot of energy, a whole lot of creativity going on. I fell in love with the sugar-coated second wave of stuff, like Cethereal Emperor, Dimmu Borgir, and basically what it is like black metal with heavy synth on top of it, keyboards. It's almost like somebody coming into a studio, writing a really masterful keyboard piece, and then you go and you scream on top of it. Then you go and you write guitar lines on top of it. It's like synthesizer has become like the granddaddy, the staple for black metal.
And that's almost like sacrilegious if you take it all the way back to the roots, like with Mayhem, because it was the guitar, it was the drums.
The more fierce you were, the better it sounded. And it flipped around 1993 to where, hey, let's polish this up, throw a keyboard on it, and man, people loved it just from that, Yeah. I'd say the pinnacle of black metal is probably from 1990 to 93. Hence those years where they were burning down the churches and, the murders happened with Euronymous and Varg. That whole time period, I think, was probably about 3 years. And I want to bring this up. When I came here to the States, I saw the Kerrang! Magazine, and it was talking about the satanic metal scene in Norway. They had no idea what the hell was going on because those bands weren't particularly talking about any kind of Satanism terms or anything. It was all pagan lyrics. And that's what I want to touch upon. It just almost seems like back then,
a lot of it was Norse mythology.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And Christians viewed it all as Satanism. For one, they didn't even know what the hell they were talking about. And two, it's like, my idea with Christians in general, if it's not Christian, like it's got to be Satanist.
Yeah.
It's
the duality.
Right.
It's the duality, it's either one or the other.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's either one or the other, and like things just aren't that simple. No. Things are we can make things very simple if we want to. But like they're just not, Christianity has been accused of destroying culture, burning books, records, literature, etc., etc. Christianity, in the black metal view, more than likely, correct me if I'm wrong, Christianity is the root to all the problems within the modern world. Now, I can see this to a certain degree from the Norwegian perspective, but I'm not sure how it applies to, let's say, affluent affluent trust fund Caucasian kids that come from the suburbs of America. But the more that I thought about that, those are generalizations too. Those are stereotypical things too, because just because somebody has a trust fund or just because somebody is Caucasian or Hispanic, that doesn't mean that like they don't have problems either, right?
Yeah, but with Christianity, and I'm glad you're here because I want to ask you this. It's like,
Yeah.
thou shalt not kill. They killed millions in the name of Christianity.
That's true.
So right there, that's hypocrisy in its purest form. That's why I don't get it. That's why I don't understand, Catholics. I don't understand Christians because it's
Well, and one of the reasons that I chose this text was because Paul is having the Spirit of God moves to such a degree here in the text in the book of Acts, and people come and they begin to burn. They begin to burn their books of magic and things like that, and it says that they counted up the value of all these things, and that and it's one thing like. It's one thing if you are convicted by the Spirit of God and you feel the presence and the power of Jesus drawing you to Him, and you do that of your own free will and of your own accord. But when we get to a place like really that happened in the Satanic Panic here in North America, when you get to and really what some of the Norwegian black metal death scene black metal scene experience, when you come to the place where like you're forced to get rid of things, because you got to be careful, right? Because once you start burning books and once you start burning art and once you start burning and getting rid of things, if you're not careful, it's a slippery slope and you wind up starting to burn people.
Yeah.
And you got to be careful with that. And that happens within the church. It happens within secular society. It happens with the power of the state. It happens with totalitarian regimes. Mm-hmm. It happens under the guise of communists, Stalin, all those types of things. When you start burning books, when you start burning things, and you don't have a choice or a say in it, then things get very dangerous. And that's when they get dangerous, is when you label this thing is good and this thing is bad, and there's no in between. And when you do that, you don't leave the doors of communication open, because who would have ever thought that an evangelical could sit down and have an intelligent conversation with a person that plays black metal? There's people that I know in my circles, and I have more problems with the ignorance and the one-sidedness within my own church circles, where I would be deemed a heretic. But you know what? The gospel is about building relationships with people, listening to people, looking into ideas, even though they may make us uncomfortable, even though they may challenge us. I showed my kids that performance art that's in the film.
Wow,
what's you met that guy?
Yeah, Frost.
I showed them Frost, and they and like their reaction wasn't what I thought it was. They reacted when he's sitting there on the airplane. And there's that little boy, and that little boy's just like, what in the, that little boy's just like, what in the is going on,
Thinking about Frost is just sending chills up my
now
spine,
explain
man.
that. Now you don't acquiesce, and you don't have to acquiesce that Jesus is your Savior to have that sixth sense, or to sense evil or something dark, an aura coming off of a person. But you said that you met that guy, and they always say you never want to meet your heroes, right?
Yeah.
And what happened when you met him?
Man, I don't know. I just crossed the room, went over, shook his hand, said I enjoyed his music. He to me just seemed like he was a deeply disturbed individual.
Okay.
On top of not wanting to be around anybody, he seemed like he was like a recluse.
Yeah.
I don't know. Just being by the guy, his aura, his energy was just like, I reached over and shook his hand and was like, okay, that was about it. I had enough. I don't know what it was about him. Maybe it's just his personality. But to me, he was a very, very intense person. And yeah, sometimes I guess you just don't want to meet your.
Yeah.
You know,
Well, this happened to me one time. This was years and years and years ago. We went to, I knew people. I went to high school with a guy that he never played death metal, but he was adamant to, deicide and Abaddon and destruction. Like he was like way into that stuff. And his name was Adrian, and he wore the the leather motorcycle coat, and he had the long hair, and I couldn't take him to parties and stuff because I took him to a party and everybody be playing pool and just having fun, and then all of a sudden you'd look around and Adrian would have some guy by the throat and he'd have both of his hands around his neck, and people were like, what the hell is wrong with him, but like so like that was kind of my first taste of it. Like he had pictures of Pantera like on his wall, and he was like making, they'd written with Sharpies making fun of Pantera because they weren't hard enough and they weren't cool enough and they weren't evil enough, and like excuse me. But I remember being at this party. It was a Halloween party, and like we showed up at this Halloween party, me and this buddy of mine, and it was Halloween, and we were dressed up in drag, and we'd taken acid, and I remember that acid was starting to kick in, and I remember looking around, and I remember seeing all these like death metal, like black metal guys at that party, and I told my buddy, we got to get the hell out of here, because if we don't get out of here, like we're gonna get hurt, like something's gonna happen to us. But I noticed,
it's like your third eye open.
Yeah, but I noticed that within that scene, and like when I sang punk rock for a while, there was this guy named Pablo, and he sung for a band called Decapitated Jesus, and it was here in Albuquerque. It was here in Albuquerque, and like for some reason they kept putting us. They would invite us to play at these houses, and there'd be just a bunch of orangutans and a keg, and but I remember like it got ugly like real quick. Like those guys didn't like us because like we were punk rockers, and they were hardcore into death and black metal, and like we had to quit doing things to them because like those guys would have hurt us. They would have stabbed us. They would have killed us, man.
And the thing is too is the more I was miserable, the more better I played. And
that's so interesting from a spiritual perspective.
From 1996 to 10 years, 2006. I can almost remember the day this happened, because a buddy of mine from Skinned, he's like, man, you're a good player. You gotta lighten up a little bit. You have to have a little fun. At that point, I was at the top of my game playing, and the more miserable, because this music made me feel miserable after a while, but it made me feel good at the same time. I can't really explain.
Yeah. Okay.
He said, hey man, listen to this band, and it was a band called Deeds of Flesh. The album was called Path of the Weakening. First track, he put it on, and for some reason, it just popped in my head that, oh my God, that sounds great. I want to do that. And just almost, I swear to God, over just one day, I was just like, you know what, I'm going to go back to death metal. Because at that point, I was just playing strictly like Norwegian-style black metal.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I'm going to go, because I was into death metal before I was into black metal.
Uh-huh.
And so, I don't know if it was the drums or maybe the guitar riffing, but I heard that and I was just like, yeah, that's fun. I want to do that again. And so I just kind of, almost overnight, just went, hey, I'm going to go back to death metal. And from there, I became a goofball. Like, the band Pulsating, it was all about having fun and having a good time. And being, playing brutal death metal. I felt better. I felt like there was a weight off my chest. But playing this Norwegian black metal for like 15 years, it was such a damper on me. It was such a downer, but it was a good outlet for me to do what I needed to do, and it was. I swear, if I would have stayed in the black metal scene, I wouldn't be alive right now. I mean, to be honest, I would have probably either killed myself, overdosed, or drank myself to death.
Yeah, and
because it put me in that state of mind. Every day I was like that with black metal.
And see the evangelical perspective or the Christian perspective would be it seemed like when you had that turning point, you heard that song, and the evangelical would say that in some way, and this is going to be hard for my contemporaries to understand this or to even accept this, but it seems to me you may not call it that, others may not call it that, but what happened when you heard that song, there was something that clicked. There was some kind of light that broke through. Something happened, and people would call that a divine intervention. They would call it the grace of God. They would call it God's mercy. They would call it something supernatural happened to change you from that path, and maybe in some way through the years, maybe you're making your way more towards living a happier and a productive life, because you may not call it the grace of God, you may not call it biblical, but that is actually a classical way that people come back into relationship with God, right? Like the prodigal son, like he found himself at the end of his journey. He had wasted all his possessions. He had wasted all his substances. He find himself, it says he came to his senses, and he was in the pig pen. And for a Jewish young man to feed pigs was the most awful, degrading thing that a person could do, especially if you were, your God was the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It was a horrible, terrible thing. But he began the journey back home. And the problem with evangelicals, and especially fundamentalist evangelicals, is we want people to have that moment of clarity, have that moment of light, have that moment, whether it be divine intervention, the grace of God, the mercy of God, a supernatural awakening, and we want people just to change everything immediately to like right now. And if they don't do it right now, then nothing has really happened. So you may be on a journey that is going to take 20, 30 years. And that doesn't mean that you're going to be sitting in church one day, paying tithes, listening to preachers. But like something supernatural happened to turn you from that path.
I could say that.
Because that was you just said that, if you would have stayed on that path, it was almost like the wide path that leads to destruction. And so, but once again, with black metal, with Christianity, with good, with evil, it's really hard to put your finger on it and pinpoint it, because the moment that we try to corral them, the moment that we try to put fences around them, they fall apart.
Yeah.
So that's like so interesting to me.
It was. I mean, maybe, some people get it with reading the Bible. Maybe they just wake up one day and say, hey, you know what? I feel good. This weight is off my chest. But for me, that one particular song, my life with the black metal scene was over. I can definitely say it was cold and grim every day. I was in this funk. I was in this depression, and I was enjoying every minute of it. And
right.
I still can't. I still don't understand why I was like that for so many years. But yeah, so maybe some people use the Bible to come back and bring their spirit back. But for me, it was one particular death metal song that was like, wow, I want to do that again. I'm tired of being depressed. Miserable. I'm tired of being, hanging my hair in my face and wearing the corpse paint and just being grim. And I wanted to come alive again, basically. When I heard that song, I was like, yeah, I'm going to go do that again. And it was just like that, like the snap of a finger. I have a friend of mine that I work with in the factory, and he plays death metal. Like he's got the King Diamond tickets. Like he's already got them. He's got them. But I asked him about like, when did you change, and like, why did you change? And this guy, he's a wonderful guy. He didn't play it. He wasn't successful. I don't know what caliber he plays at or anything like that, but he's just one of these guys. He's very straightforward. He's a straight shooter. And I told him, I said, how did you, what happened? Like, why did you give it up? Why did you quit doing it? And he comes to work, and he had a nuclear assault shirt. He wears the Jackson guitar shirts. He's a cool guy. I'd like to meet him.
And he struggled in his life with depression and all those types of things. And he told me, he says, he says, I got to a certain age. He said, where like I couldn't do it anymore. He said, I couldn't carry on like this. He said, I had to grow up. He said, I wanted a car. I wanted a house. He said, I wanted guitars. He said, and I just couldn't keep moving on in this, what some would say juvenile, irrational behavior. And, in the novel and in the movie, in A Clockwork Orange, Alex DeLarge, like, he commits acts of murder, violence, rape, criminal damage to property. He's obsessed with Beethoven, right? Interesting, the music is there. But at the end of the novella, he abandons his life of crime and debauchery, right? Anthony Burgess is the writer of the novel. Anthony Burgess seems to imply or suggest that Alex grows up and matures. And I saw that when I watched Until the Light Takes Us with the guy from Dark Throne, right?
Fenris?
Yeah, he like they said he still plays the music to a certain degree, but he works for the postal service in Europe somewhere, probably in Norway. But so like there, for me, I looked into that abyss and I spent days and hours looking at it. And, of course, I prayed about it too, because I know that it can be dangerous to look into the abyss, but we have to look into the abyss. And church people, they have to look into the abyss. And a lot of them are afraid to, and I understand that, but that's why we're so terrible at developing relationships. And when you stop looking into the abyss, that's when you get things that happen where it's like, oh, we're just going to disregard people's cultures, we're just going to disregard people's beliefs because our religion is the only religion, and if you don't accept our religion, then we are going to eradicate you and we're going to get rid of you, and that has nothing to do with the Bible, that has nothing to do with the love of Jesus. And when you stop looking at things that happened like the Norwegian black metal scene, when you want to just push that stuff aside, you create an atmosphere for it to happen again.
Man, you boink.
Yeah,
hit the nail right on the head.
But the thing is, but with the guy from Dark Throne, like there was hope because, and there was hope for the guy. What was his name in Dark Throne?
Fenris.
Yeah, there was hope for him. There was hope for Lawrence. And there was hope with you because, a lot of people struggled with Anthony Burgess's 21st chapter of Clockwork Orange because, they didn't want Alex to grow up. They wanted Alex to keep, because he was the anti-hero, they wanted him to keep mischief. Even Varg, and I don't advocate really Varg because I know that he has ties with white supremacy, and he's got his views are nothing that but he has a right to those views, because we're free individuals with free will. I'm not saying they're of course they're I don't want to get into all that, but even he seems to have kind of grown out of that phase of life. So it happened to you, right?
Yeah. For me, it was basically the need to be a father. Basically, once I had kids, that's what became important, and it's the most important thing for me today, and probably till the day I die. Yes, I'm still playing black metal. Yes, I'm still playing death metal. I'm a guitar player. I'm always going to listen to brutal, negative music. For some reason, I just get a kick out of it, and it's a good outlet. But as of for right now, I did kind of grow out of that stage. But I noticed when people at my age, 45, people that are still into it as much as they were when they were 16, man, they're miserable nowadays.
Yeah, so and I wanted to ask you about that too. So there are people that are like they're lifers. Right, there's 60-year-old guys still wearing the corpse paint, still rocking the leather pants.
A lot of important black metal bands that were around in the early '90s are still doing it, man.
Yeah, so it's like they kind of never grow up,
Yeah, there's a state of arrested development. I think
that's a great term, really. Yeah,
it is, and I think that's what kept me so young for so long. And it's kind of weird once I stopped playing extreme music and really focusing on other things rather than just music, I almost felt like I aged a little quicker. Because it's almost like it was like for me in the metal scene, it was like a long extended time of an arrested development. I see. Because I was just kind of in one spot, like in my comfort zone. And I guess that's a good way to kind of put it.
Yeah. Well, as we wrap this up, I really appreciate it. It's been wonderful to, and this is what true evangelicals should be able to do. We should be able to sit down with people that have different mindsets, different views. You can learn something. I've learned so much from Kent. We've developed a friendship. I don't push the Bible on him. I don't push my beliefs on him. I see him as a human being with integrity and character. But as evangelicals, we Christians have got to come back to that place where we can sit around a table, have intelligent conversations, and learn from one another. And there's hope tonight. There was hope for Kent, for some of these other people that we talked about. They grew out of these things, and thank God, because the greatest thing that we want is people to change, and people to change for the better. And it was the divine order. You wanted to be a father. Like, that became more important to you than the corpse paint, the depression. It's almost, I did that too with punk. It was like a Peter Pan. Like, I didn't have to grow up. You know what I mean? I didn't have to grow up. I didn't have any responsibilities. I just had to go to the methadone clinic, and I could smoke crack, and I could live in a car, and I could play in 3 bands. And that was a lot of fun for a long time. But it got to a point where it was 27, 28, 29. I looked in the mirror and I was 30 years old, and I was like, what the hell am I doing? But I was caught in a trap of vice and depression. For me, the way out was Christ. But it doesn't work that way with everybody. But the greatest thing that we want is for people to get better.
Yes.
And their lives to improve. So I applaud you, and I appreciate so much talking to you. We're going to have some more content with Kent. We're going to keep running with these, talking about some controversial things, because you know what? They're important. History is important. Pop culture is important. And if we're ever going to understand each other, we have to be willing to listen and to share ideas. So I thank you for your time. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, express your gratitude, share it, pass it along with somebody, do whatever you want with it. God bless you.
Thank you for having me.
It went an hour and 6 minutes. That's pretty good. It's a good way to end it.
Yeah, that was.
It was a good. It was a good natural ending.
Yeah.